Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about college football. But before I get into what today's video is actually going to be about, let me first say that just like last year, I am going to be doing another video about new coaches in the world of college football, and I'm going to be doing another video about coaches on the hot seat heading into the 2022 season, just like I did last year. The reason why I'm holding out on those is because, especially with the new coaches in college football, there's a big rumor going around that Jim Harbaugh wants out at Michigan, and he's trying to get back into the NFL. But of course, if that happens, it won't happen until after the NFL season actually concludes. But there's a rumor going around that Jim Harbaugh is wanting out at Michigan. And of course, if he does get out, then the Michigan job will become available. So we may not be quite done yet with new coaches in the world of college football. And I'm also going to be doing another video about the transfer portal. I know I did one a few weeks back, but when I did the last one, there was still a bunch of players that were still out there. And as of right now, we still have some big-time players who have not yet committed to their new school. So I'm trying to wait to see if they announce their new school coming up here in the next few weeks before I do that video. But I will be doing one of those coming up sometime between now and when next the college football season starts. But today we're going to be talking about some of the comments that Gary Barta made. I guess he made them on Wednesday because I read the article Wednesday night, but maybe he said them on Tuesday. I'm not quite sure, but it leads to a few questions. And if you have not heard what Gary Barta said, Gary Barta is the athletic director at Iowa. And he said that the Big Ten is thinking about going from 9 conference games down to 8 conference games and doing away with divisions as early as 2023, which makes it worth talking about because if that's true, then this upcoming season will be the last time that the Big Ten plays 9 conference games. And it'll be the last time the Big Ten has divisions. Now, of course, we know the Big Ten divisions right now are East and West. But when they first started having divisions, it was the leaders and the legends, which was just the stupidest thing ever. But you understand why Gary Barta said it, because even when he made the comments, he said they're doing it because of the alliance. And the alliance, by the way, is supposed to be the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 playing each other. Because in the case of Iowa right now, you play 9 conference games, and then you have the one game every year where you play Iowa State, which is a non-conference game, but it's your rival, so it's not going anywhere. And then every school and every conference has that one game a year where you play either a 1AA school or a lower tier group of 5 school and get an easy win, let your backups play and all that. So if Iowa does that, that leaves them one game a year where they can play somebody from the ACC or the Pac-12. Do you know how long it would take Iowa to play everybody in the ACC and everybody in the Pac-12 if they only play 1 per year? But if they go down to 8 conference games, even if they still play Iowa State and they still play that lower tier group of 5 school, that leaves them 2 games a year against the ACC and the Pac-12. So it makes sense, and I understand why he's saying it, because they want to be part of the alliance as soon as they can possibly start the alliance. But my first question is, if they do that and they get rid of divisions, how do you know who plays for the Big Ten Championship? Because he didn't say that they were doing away with the Big Ten Championship, and I don't think they can when every other major conference has a conference championship game. But if you don't have divisions and you only play 8 conference games, there's 14 teams in the Big Ten. That's 6 teams you won't play. So that's almost half the conference you won't play. So let's say the season ends and 4 teams went 6-2 in the Big Ten. Who plays for the Big Ten championship? I mean, how do you decide who plays? If they didn't play each other, are you just going to go by which teams are the highest ranked? Because that doesn't seem quite fair. So how do they settle the Big Ten championship game if this happens? And the next question is, who does the SEC play? And what I mean by that is, if there's an alliance between the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and the ACC, then that means, they're going to play each other. So that means all 3 of those conferences outside of your rival game, if it's a non-conference game, some teams' rival is in their conference. And outside of your one game against a either lower tier group of 5 school or a 1AA school, that leaves you 2 games. So if this alliance takes effect, then that means the ACC and the Big Ten and the Pac-12, all their major non-conference games will be against each other. So the SEC gets left out. So they're going to play, I guess they're just going to have to play a bunch of group of 5 schools because that's all that's left. Yeah, you can schedule Big 12 teams, but after Oklahoma and Texas leave to go to the SEC, is there anybody in the Big 12 worth playing? I mean, yeah, does Iowa State look better on your schedule than playing UConn? Well, absolutely. But at the end of the day, neither one of those games are big games. And at the end of the day, everybody in the SEC, with the exception of Vanderbilt and Kentucky, should beat Iowa State. So even though it's still a win, and it might look a little bit better on your resume than playing UConn, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's still not a big game. It's still a game that when you play it, hey, we're going to win this game. And you don't want that. You want to have, a couple of non-conference games against teams that make people outside of your school or their school watch the game. And as of right now, it's not looking like that can happen, because if the ACC and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten all form the alliance to play each other, the SEC's getting left out, and they can't play 12 non-conference games or 12 conference games. So what do? How do you fix it? Because you don't want to have 8 conference games and then play your rival if your rival's not in your conference, and then you have 3 games left, and all 3 of your games are against 1AA schools or group of 5 schools. But I don't know how you fix it if the other 3 conferences that are major conferences are playing each other. Because like I said, the Big 12 is still a major conference. But after Oklahoma and Texas leave, there's not going to be anybody in the Big 12 that you can play and beat. And it's going to put some big star on your resume, because there's nobody left worth even talking about. The best team in the Big 12 is probably going to be Iowa State, but as of right now, they're not great. Oklahoma State was great this past year, but are they going to be a top 10 team every year? Probably not. Are they going to be a top 15 team every year? Probably not. So if you have any thoughts on the alliance, or any thoughts on who the SEC can play, or any thoughts on who decides and how do they decide who plays for the Big Ten championship if you go to 8 conference games and you get rid of divisions, because I don't understand that. And the next question I have is, how do we fix overtime? And of course this gets brought up because if you follow the NFL, last weekend we had the Bills and Chiefs game, which went to overtime, and it ended with the Chiefs winning. And of course, nobody likes the NFL overtime rule, where the team gets the ball, if they get the ball first and they score a touchdown, game's over. Now, if they get a field goal, then the other team will get the ball, but if they get a touchdown, game's over. So nobody likes the NFL overtime rule, but nobody likes the college football overtime rule either. But most folks say that even though it's bad, it's better than the NFL overtime. But my question is, how do you fix it? How do you make it better? Now, a lot of people are now saying get rid of it. And I don't want to see that, because I hate a tie. I would rather lose than tie. I cannot stand to tie. And I've heard several coaches and several players over the years say they would rather lose than tie. Nobody likes to tie. But also a tie makes things more complicated in the playoff format, because think about if the season ends and just say you have two teams that finish undefeated and you have two teams that finish with one loss, and then you have four teams that finish with a tie. So your top 8 teams, you have 2 that's undefeated, 2 that have one loss, and 4 that have a tie. How do you decide which 4 go to the playoffs? Because the ones that tied, they didn't lose, but they also didn't win. So it would make things even more convoluted for an already convoluted playoff system. So you don't want that. But at the same time, how do you fix the overtime? Because if you think about what they could do, let's say they back you up to midfield and each team gets the ball at midfield. Well, if you've got a good kicker, if you get 2 first downs, you're in field goal range. So you could kick field goals back and forth for an hour if you have 2 good kickers. But at the same time, if you move the ball down to your opposing team's 25-yard line and then make it last just as long as a regulation would last, let's say both defenses are tired and both defenses are struggling to stop the other team. Well, then you could still go right down the field and score touchdowns, and that's going to make the game last even longer. But let's say both offenses are tired, especially if the game involves a Tennessee, a team that's going to run 100 plays in regulation. Well, by the time you get to overtime and you get to where you run 110, 120 plays, you're going to be tired. So if you start on your opposing 25-yard line and both offenses are tired, then nobody's going to score, and the game is going to last forever. Now, you can make it more entertaining and more exciting and just make it like soccer, where you just have sudden death kicks, where you just go out there and just kick field goals all day long. But instead of using a regular kicker, say you use your linebacker or your defensive tackle or your quarterback, something like that. That would be more entertaining, but it still might last forever if neither kicker can kick a field goal. So I really don't know if there's a good way to have overtime. And a lot of people are saying get rid of it now because we're supposed to be all about player safety. Well, if you're all about player safety and it's the regular season and the game is tied, just go ahead and end the game. That way the players are not out there for additional snaps and additional hits that they don't have to have. You can just have the game end in regulation with a tie. But at the same time, I don't like a tie. I hate a tie. I don't want a tie. So I want to know how we can fix overtime, but still have overtime without getting rid of it, so that we don't have ties. And I just don't know if there's a good way to do it, because now, starting on your opponent's 25-yard line, you're already pretty much in field goal range as soon as you get the ball, unless your kicker's just flat out terrible. So I get that's not a great way to do it. But at the same time, like I said, making them go the length of the field might not be good, because if both defenses are tired, both teams are still going to score. It's just going to take 4 or 5 extra plays, and that's 4 or 5 extra plays that the defense ain't got to be on the field. So I really don't know how you can fix it. You don't want to have a 15-minute quarter, because then it's just like playing 5 quarters, and that's sure not good for player safety. But there's got to be a way to fix it. I just don't know what that way is. So if anybody has any ideas on how to fix it and still have it without having a tie, then please feel free to let me know, because I can remember growing up when I was in middle school and high school watching college football, and seeing a tie used to drive me crazy. Now, it doesn't happen very often, because most of the time, if it's late in the game and the game's tied, whichever coach has the ball is going to try to be more aggressive and do something so he can get down the field and get in field goal range at least, instead of just getting the ball with a minute to go and saying, we'll play for overtime. They'll get the ball and actually try to drive down the field and get in field goal range so they can at least kick a field goal. And then if they missed it, then there's a tie, but at least they tried. But nowadays, if, a lot of coaches, if they're conservative, if they get the ball with 30 seconds to go and the game's tied, they'll just run the ball and let the clock expire down the ball. And if you're a top 5 team or a top 10 team and you think you've got a chance to go to the playoffs, and you get the ball late in the game and the game is tied, you're going to attempt to score, because more than likely, if you tie and there are 2 teams that's undefeated and 2 teams that have 1 loss and you have a tie, you're probably getting left out, because nobody likes a tie. It ain't like the NFL system where we have a tiebreaker. The Steelers made the playoffs this year because of the fact they had a tie. Well, college football doesn't work that way. There's no tiebreaker system. If you tie, more than likely you're probably crap out of luck, unless you tied with somebody else that's really, really good. If you go 10-0-1, but your one tie comes against a team that's 4-7-1, that's probably going to go against you, because you tied with a team that's flat out terrible. So I guess it all depends on who you tie with. But at the end of the day, who wants to sit back on a Saturday and watch their team play and watch the game end in a 24-24 tie? You want to see a winner, especially if a game is tied and you've seen your team, miss 2 field goals, drop a touchdown, and then you spend the rest of the day thinking, man, that sucks. That missed field goal cost us that game. Well, if you tie, it crosses your mind even more, because you tied. Those 3 points, really hurt you, because if you lose by 3, well, then all the field goal miss does is bring the game back to a tie. But if you tie, then that field goal really, really hurts you. So nobody likes to see a tie. So any thoughts on the alliance? Any thoughts on how to fix college football overtime? Please feel free to let me know. Any thoughts on how the Big Ten is going to decide who plays for the Big Ten championship if they go down to 8 conference games and get rid of divisions? Please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. My cloning experiment finally paid off. I'm beside myself. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.